Welcome. My name is David Latt, and I'm the editor-at-large and founding editor of AboveTheLaw.com, a website covering the legal profession that reaches more than 1 million unique visitors a month. We are pleased you can all join us for our latest webinar, How Large Law Firms Are Using Legal Research as a Competitive Advantage. Thank you for tuning in, and thank you to our friends at Thomson Reuters for sponsoring. Before proceeding, a quick housekeeping announcement. To access the webcast, you need a computer with internet access and speakers or headphones. If you are having any technical issues, such as problems with sound, please just explain your issue by typing in the question pane on the InExpo interface. A webcast engineer will then reach out to you to troubleshoot. Today we will be covering two topics that we discuss extensively in the pages of Above the Law: artificial intelligence, or AI, and how law firms can best serve their clients. These topics go together naturally because AI is being harnessed in so many ways to help lawyers give their clients better service at lower cost and in less time. This is especially the case with legal research, a crucial part of practice, especially for young lawyers at large firms. We couldn't have two better speakers to discuss these subjects than David Curl and Don McLeod. I'm so pleased to welcome them to the webcast. We'll begin with David Curl, who is Director of the Technology and Innovation Platform at the Thomson Reuters Legal Executive Institute. In that role, David supports TR's legal business with research and thought leadership about legal technology and innovation. He is a well-known speaker and thinker on these subjects, and he has appeared in Above the Law's pages on several occasions as an expert analyst. David will be followed by Don McLeod, Knowledge Management or KM Manager at Debevoise & Plimpton. Don has more than 30 years of experience as a law librarian and is the author of a very useful book that you should all check out, How to Find Out Anything. In terms of format, the webinar will run for roughly 45 minutes. David will speak about how artificial intelligence is transforming the practice of law. His remarks will provide context and background for Don, who will talk specifically about how AI is improving legal research, using several new features and enhancements for Westlaw as examples. After Don's presentation, we will take audience questions through the question panel. As the webinar proceeds, please write down your questions so you can pose them at the end. Now I'd like to turn the floor over to David Curl, who will talk about artificial intelligence in legal practice. David?
Thanks a lot, David. I'm happy to be here and welcome everybody to the presentation. This is a session on using legal research as a competitive advantage. I thought I'd start out things with a short bit on that will try to present some of the artificial intelligence aspects of legal research in some context in terms of what's going on in the rest of the industry before Don kind of drills down into some specific features and aspects of AI that are active in Westlaw. So part of my role is to do a little bit of demystifying about this and context setting about how AI in legal research fits in with AI elsewhere in our industry today. So let's get started with just some definitional things. Artificial intelligence doesn't really have any definition that everybody agrees on. In fact, some people prefer the term cognitive computing and various other terms. But it's vague for a reason, and that's because artificial intelligence isn't really any one thing. But it is a term that's used to describe any computer systems that seem to be able to perform tasks that are previously thought to require human intelligence. And that's just sort of that's a definition that focuses on the outward manifestation of AI and how it appears to work, as opposed to any specific technology or function that it does. The thing about AI is that it's like any other new technology. Once you understand how it works, it's just software, and I'll give you some examples in a minute of how there's things that you're using every day that are AI based, and more and more some of these specific tools and applications will come to fade into the background and work just like regular software. And of course, artificial intelligence is getting a lot of hype, and some people sort of think of AI as anything that makes computers act like those that operate in the movies. I'll just leave that one at that. Some of the specific technologies that are that comprise artificial intelligence are listed on the right there. And as I said, as you can see, it's not any one technology. There's a lot of techniques, data techniques, and specific technologies that are sort of baked into the concept of our AI. Things like logical inferencing, machine learning, natural language processing, which has been around for quite a while. And then there's sort of some other aspects like robotics and speech and vision recognition that are not so much text-based attributes, but more have to do with the interface between people and machines. On the left, you see some of the specific functions that those technologies can do for legal. Things like expertise automation. How can we embody the expertise of a person into a system or a program? Things like speech to text. How can we use speech to activate computers? How can we use computers to take text and convert it into speech? And translation. All of these things are just specific functions of AI that might be available to various applications in the legal services industry. But before we get to legal, I just want to remind everybody that AI is really all around us all the time. If you have one of these devices on your desk or your kitchen counter at home or on your desk, an Amazon Echo, it's a little machine that you talk to, and it does things for you. You ask it for some music, or you ask it to turn out the lights, and that's an application of various forms of AI. Machine translation is something that you might use if you ever encounter a foreign language text that you can't read. You can drop a fairly complex text into Google Translate and get an instantaneous translation that's pretty good, good enough to sort of make sense of what it is you're reading. And that stuff is built by a lot of the machine learning and neural networks that go into AI. If you listen to Spotify, you get a weekly Discover Weekly, which is recommendations for you, personalized to you based on your listening habits and the habits of and the nature of the music you listen to and the habits and traffic patterns of other users. If you read a newspaper or if you read news online, I think you'd be surprised to know how much of the texts that you read, the news stories that you read, are actually generated by machines. Particularly in areas like finance or sports, where the narratives seem to repeat themselves over and over again. It's just the values, the numbers that differentiate one article from another. That is a fertile field for text generation technologies. And then finally, chatbots, various kinds of helplines you might call that where you type in the dialogue and it feels like a natural conversation with a person, but it may actually be a machine in the background just interpreting your question based on the context and giving you answers that way. So all of those things are examples where this stuff is all around us. We don't need to think of AI as something in the future. It's already here. In terms of the legal services industry, there are a number of areas where AI is really getting a foothold. Here's a slide that shows some of those areas on the left-hand side in the orange circles. Legal research, the first one, is the one we're going to talk about today. Westlaw has been using natural language processing for over a decade now, and various other aspects of AI that Don's going to talk about in a minute have been built in along those lines. There's lots of other companies working on this stuff as well. In the realm of expert automation, there's companies that are working on sort of, as I described it before, embedding human knowledge into some sort of system or process. That's stuff that's built into our Context Express and some other products as well. E-discovery is probably the first area that was really influenced by artificial intelligence, particularly predictive coding as used in document review. And then another area, the next one, contractual analysis, is where, again, there's a lot of applications where lawyers need to review large bodies of content, in this case contracts, And there's a number of companies working on really interesting, exciting ways to extract meaning from those contracts in an automated way, rather than having humans review every contract. And then finally, litigation analytics is one area where prediction is important. Various ways to predict legal outcomes are being experimented with by a lot of companies, including Thomson Reuters. There are a number of lessons I think you can take, or I guess you'd say, I think of this as ways to think about AI as you think about where it might fit in with your particular practice, given where you work and what type of practice you have. First thing to keep in mind is that it's about the data before it's about the software. People talk about artificial intelligence as if we need to go get some of that AI, but really what you need to do is focus on what's the data that you use, what's the data that your business generates, whether that's legal data related to research and cases and matters, or is it business data related to billing and outcomes and that sort of thing. Look for cases where there are large sets of data that would seem to have great potential for having some hidden meanings in that data. I've mentioned this already, but it's really important to think of AI as not one thing. You can't read a legal news a news source without coming into encountering lots and lots of firms and corporations and software providers coming up with applications for AI, and it's all over the board in terms of applications. So it's definitely no single technology, no single application. It's all the types of examples that I've already talked about before. Another thing to remember is, as I've also said before, it's only AI until you understand it, and then it's just software. These things are going to become commonplace for us. We're going to understand that there's some processes going on in the background without necessarily, being the AI part of it being even visible. It's important to think of AI as having applications as well in, not just the practice of law, which is what we're talking about today in the form of, legal research and giving legal advice or answering legal questions, but there's also the whole business side of law, where really a lot of AI is coming into play in terms of pricing of matters and matter management. There's really a lot going on the business side of the delivery of legal services that has to do with AI. So don't just focus on thinking of AI as a way to answer legal questions. Don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. Lawyers are very critical of anything that's not perfect. They have high standards for the answers and advice that they provide, and they are reluctant to turn over any decision making to a machine. But the point is not that the machine should replace the judgment of the lawyer, but that the lawyer's judgment plus the machine's judgment or predictions or recommendations is better than either the lawyer or the machine by itself, and that's kind of the point of this one. You don't really want to get hung up on the fact that machines are fallible, humans are fallible too, and it's important to work with machines to get to better solutions and answers. This kind of technology is going to require a lot of change management in our audiences, in our industry, in our organizations. And that's one thing that law firms in particular are going to have to deal with in terms of building support for the use of these kinds of tools. And you can't just throw AI at an organization and expect it to be adopted immediately. Finally, clients are a resource. I mean, AI is one area where law firms and clients, or even in-house lawyers and their internal clients should find opportunities to partner around AI applications, because quite often one side or the other is in possession of the data. The other side may be in possession of the insight that might make sense of that data. So you need to work together with partners to make this stuff work. So with that, I'm going to stop there and turn it over to Don. He's going to help us drill down a little bit into how some of these concepts have already come to fruition in terms of legal research.
Thank you very much, David, and thank you all for joining us today. Let me get my slide here. When we talk about how large law firms are using legal research as a competitive advantage, the competitive advantage that AI offers is the ability to find information to help make legal decisions better, that is by providing more information, make it easier to get that information, provide time saving for very busy lawyers or busy researchers, and it's a tool that really helps lawyers become better researchers and deliver better results much more efficiently. So let's take a deep dive. It's kind of the tallest order and how this all plays into using legal research as a competitive advantage. As David referred to AI, it's not a single technology by any means. And in fact, some of the things that David referred to on his slides, typical AI principles of natural language searching, supervised machine learning, figuring out patterns that would not necessarily be obvious to human users, have all been incorporated into the current version of Westlaw. And to David's earlier point that AI sounds very exotic and cutting edge and robots are turning into lawyers, as a matter of fact, what we really figure out is that it's simply software that, like Westlaw in its original incarnation, is a way to help you find things more quickly, more easily. There's no magic. There's no magic under the covers. It's not some automated brain, as it were, but they are tools that do multiply human intelligence to get you to results quicker, better, and faster. So what we can do is take in turn some of the basic AI principles and show how Westlaw has baked those principles into the ordinary day-to-day legal research experience on Westlaw to help researchers get to answers better using some of these AI tools that are now standard issue from really a lot of our vendors. So let's just start. Natural language searching has been branded by Westlaw to be something called Westlaw Answers. And when you log on to Westlaw, essentially what you are looking for is an answer to a pressing question. That's pretty much self-evident. So as our example, say you are a public official who has an interest in libel law, for example, and your research task is to understand some of the standards for libel actions by public figures. You begin by trying to get a definition of who is a public figure for the purpose of libel actions. And we discovered that in Westlaw Answers really utilizes natural language processing in a way that not only Westlaw, but almost every other commercial research service has tried to implement in the past, but they do it far better nowadays. It's natural language searching has been greatly improved. For those of you who are vintage and remember Westlaw is natural, the first iterations were not great, and I will be the first to admit, as a librarian, I dug in my feet and said, ain't no way in heck that a software can outthink me. I can write a Boolean search like nobody's business, and I can select a database and get a good result. To a great extent, I have been persuaded otherwise, because natural language processing has really been greatly improved so that we can ask in plain language the system for a result and get better results than even a skilled librarian. For example, if we take the old-fashioned way of searching here in Westlaw, and I hope the slide is legible, we can do a typical Boolean search of asking for the definition of a public figure with the proximity connectors, running that search through a large body of data. In the past, we would narrow down what databases we were searching by selecting just case law or just statutes or just secondary sources. Instead, we're going to run that Boolean search against all of Westlaw and allow our results to be filtered here on the left after we have run the search. I want to draw your attention to the results list. There's about 1,200 results in various categories that might be responsive to our Boolean search. But I do also want to point out to you that here in the initial analysis, the overview has 11 items. Two of the main cases that the Boolean search has produced for us, by purposes of exclusion, I will point out to you that two of the leading cases on point for the definition of a public figure for a libel law do not appear in this search. And what natural language processing brings to the table is the ability to be more inclusive than a Boolean search is, It tends to, in Google fashion, be over-inclusive, as well as give the researcher that extra added oomph to get results that might not necessarily have been perfectly obvious. I always liken this, the difference between Boolean searching and natural language processing, as the difference between, say, a telegram with a handful of nouns and words versus a telephone chat, where there's an iterative process to allow you to get in deeper depth and really define what your query is a little bit better. So here's our Boolean search. We're going to take a look at the natural language process to see what has been done here. And when we ask Westlaw a straightforward question, what is a public figure under libel law, we can see right off the bat that we get a far larger range of results, additional categories including case law, secondary sources, the all-important key numbers to help you find additional information about your topic. And I'll also point out that this is produced to be qualitatively accurate, better results, because we have surfaced from our natural language search New York Times v. Sullivan, as well as Gertz v. Welch, which any libel lawyer would know from experience as the two leading Supreme Court cases on the subject. So natural language processing is not only mainstream, it really kind of does a better job than Boolean search, even Boolean search written by in the hands of an experienced librarian. So natural language searching gives you one foot on a rock. It provides broad and accurate initial results. You've got a results list of items that you can then begin to interact with. And that is going to lead us to really one of the other major features of artificial intelligence after you begin to explore, and that's the ability to provide supervised machine learning. Supervised machine learning is a term of art, but essentially what it refers to is the ability of a software to learn from its users exactly what the user is looking for, to understand a little more about the intention of the researcher who's interacting with the software. So in our instance, what Westlaw calls research recommendations is leveraging the idea that interactive and these iterative processes, which are a typical part of legal research, can be tracked and can provide the software with enough insight into what it is that you're looking for to offer additional suggestions. So this is a critical piece of making sure that AI helps you find better answers. I always liken research recommendations to a reference interview, something that a good law librarian would undertake, to answer the question of what are you really trying to find out. We began with a very broad search. Who's a public figure under libel law? We didn't exactly define down to the degree of detail that a lawyer ordinarily would look for to get a precise question. Research recommendations, though, after it has discerned what cases we are clicking on and what key numbers, for example, we have selected to refine our search, can get a better grip on exactly what it is that we're looking to find. So it's putting a law librarian into the software. After you've interacted with some of the results that the natural language process has originally produced for you, Westlaw begins to get a good understanding and get a better feel for what it is you're looking for. And in those instances, after you've done a few click-throughs and read a few things, or maybe selected a key number to further refine your search, Westlaw, like Spotify, as David alluded to, will produce here in the upper right and indicate with a little red button that it has additional information that it can recommend to you for your review. Again, a purpose of this is to be all-inclusive, to suggest different paths that your research might take that might not ordinarily have come to mind when you first begin your research. And as those of you who are experienced Westlaw searchers, you understand that this iterative process now becomes a little more streamlined, because you don't need to go back and rejigger a new search or find a different database to search, but rather you can rely on Westlaw's insight based on your interactions with it to find additional information. One of the things I do like about the research recommendations that Westlaw has provided here is that their recommendations are not essentially a black box. It's not an opaque process. In fact, right at the top under research recommendations, Westlaw is kind enough to say, why are you recommending these things? And it will explain the fact that you have clicked through these particular cases or have selected one key number over another, that it's an indicator to Westlaw of what it is you're looking for. And Westlaw is just verifying, this is what you looked at. Would you like more like this? Here's some additional things that you might be interested in. And these are AI tools that we really did not have and could not rely upon even as recent as 2 years ago. So Westlaw has really done a good job of incorporating and baking in some standard AI features of natural language processing recommendations to make sure that Westlaw acts in that fashion and utilizes some of the the new features of AI that you've heard about from other vendors. The typical legal research process has a beginning, a middle, and an end. The beginning is to ask a question. You set out to look for something. The middle of it is actually getting a result and then interacting with that result to decide, well, this is relevant, that's not relevant, this might be useful. There is a human element of decision making. The lawyer or the researcher brings their own experience and their own insight into the results they've received and uses their professional insight to decide what is right, what is wrong. Westlaw for years has encouraged the use of folders, and unfortunately it was a feature that has been long overlooked by lawyers, researchers as well. But folders now take on a new importance in this AI world. Earlier I was alluding to the middle part of this process where you're interacting with documents. Westlaw has encouraged researchers to save things to folders. Most people don't. The normal process, you run a Westlaw search, you get a few results, you download maybe some cases, you stick them in the document management system where they're never seen or heard from again. Rather, Westlaw, as part of their AI process, is encouraging all researchers to take any results that might be relevant to a question, create a folder, and add those materials into the folder, because that opens the door to any number of very valuable and very useful artificial intelligence uses. And what I mean by that is the folder itself also, in its first instance, just serves as an organization place. It's a place where you can collect all of your results and not have to look back for it. It's just an organizational principle. If you're like me, I do research and then forget where I downloaded things or where I've printed particular items, so it's really handy to have an organizational folder. But the same AI recommendation software, the supervised machine learning process, can be applied to the materials that you have included in your folder. The folder analysis allows the software to make sure that you did not miss anything important. A case that's on point, a relevant statute, for instance. You might want to look for some examples of motions that were filed in support of your principle of law. The folder makes sure you don't miss anything. And more importantly, the folder also allows you to socialize your results. There's a collaborative feature that's part of the Westlaw folder system that becomes important in the AI world because we are all accustomed now not to living in a siloed world where we just run our Westlaw search and that's all there is to it, but rather we can share these results with others, including by downloading your folder results to Dropbox or to Kindle. You can add and filter additionally the materials that you have gathered there. You'll see here on the right, I was earlier talking about the folder analysis that can take your decisions, the materials you've decided have been on point, and then run through and analyze the various points of law that have been indicated by your set of relevant results. That folder analysis, again, makes sure that you don't miss anything and provides additional insight into the materials that you have collected to make sure that you have been comprehensive and without requiring you to go back and do multiple searches through various databases. In addition to socializing this, part of the socialization process is the ability to annotate your results. So if we are all on a client team within the firm, or we want to share our results with the client themselves, we can add annotations. Bob needs to review this, include this in the brief, check this case, whatever the annotation might be. But that ability to socialize results goes a long way to making sure that content just is not reviewed and then downloaded and never heard from again. So it's an important feature, the socialization of this information. So those are kind of the three pillars of AI tools that Westlaw has incorporated. In the beginning, Westlaw Answers provides that natural language processing that will get you better, more comprehensive results that you can then review quickly. The supervised machine learning piece will allow the software to understand and what it is that you're looking for as an effort to really focus your broad search into a more narrow result that will be a lot more pertinent, perhaps, than a very broad Boolean search. And then in the third instance, once you have your results, what can you do with those results? You can store them for future reference. You can exchange them with your colleagues. You can exchange them with the client. You can also provide some additional analysis on the set of results that you have dug up. One last little feature that we also find useful. It's the AI principle of entity extraction. Westlaw has been in business long enough that they have very large databases of what we would call authority files on not only cases, but also on people in the legal industry. This includes judges and attorneys. Westlaw also has a company investigator where you have concrete, objective, factual information about companies. And the entity extraction allows you, the researcher, as you're working through a particular legal document, be it a case, a statute, a secondary source such as a law review article, where there's a reference to one of these very objectively identifiable entities, like a statute or a person, a judge or an attorney or a company. You can quickly click through without having to run a new search to get some additional information about that entity. So for example, if we were searching for Sarbanes-Oxley, wanted to grab some cases or statutes around that, you'll see on the right that our initial search, whether we look for it or not, will give us easy access to the underlying text of the act, some of the legislative notes, the citations, to give us a leg up. This is more a matter of convenience. It's not a gee whiz, wow, cutting edge tool, but the idea of embedding and linking to these discrete entities is a huge time saver. It does make you more competitive. It's anything that saves time and effort really is a winner. And Westlaw has done a pretty good job of embedding, either by adding snapshots on the right-hand panel to some of your results, or by hyperlinking references to people or companies within documents. Here I'm highlighting William P., also known as Bud Rogers from Cravath. Once we load the document, all of the attorneys and judges mentioned in this document have been hyperlinked. And if we click on the link, we just get a nice, neat bio. It doesn't take much effort. It's really one of the benefits of this. So it's, again, nothing that's going to stop the world from turning on its axis, but certainly a time saver and a very useful feature to have there in Westlaw. So that, in a nutshell, is the way that AI, as David earlier alluded to, has incorporated itself into the day-to-day work that we all do. Searching Westlaw is no longer a question of selecting a database, running a Boolean search, and going through that process any number of times, which is a typical research process. But rather, it now can automate the beginning, middle, and the end of the research process to help us get to an answer more effectively. We don't miss things. We can get better results because the algorithms are trained well enough to really be precise. And our results don't stand alone. They, thanks to foldering and the folder analysis and the reporting, can be easily shared with others, including clients and teams. So that's essentially how Westlaw has provided AI in a very practical way to its products, and really are the tools that, again, don't replace lawyers and don't replace researchers, but act as a leverage to help us get to information a little more effectively and a little more reliably. And as I said before, the great strides have been made in the reliability of the software. It's not going to replace anybody's judgments, but these certainly are helpful with the heavy lifting. So with that, I thank you all for listening, and I will turn the presentation back over to David Latt, who will be happy to field any questions. So David, thank you.
Hey, thank you, Don and David, for your great insights. We will now open the floor to questions. Please submit your questions by typing them in the questions and answers box. We will review them and then pose them to the panelists. So here's our first question, which I will direct to David Curl. This is especially pertinent in an age of cybersecurity concerns. Can AI be hacked? David.
AI per se, I suppose, is like any other technology or software application. If it's running on machines that are vulnerable, certainly. It's no different, I guess, than any other software application in that respect. I wouldn't say it's more or less vulnerable than any other system that an organization might run. I don't. The question also makes you think of, one of my points about focusing on the data and not the application. I think the greater risk is, making sure that whatever data you're using in an AI application is secure, because that's really the fuel that runs most AI applications is the underlying data. So that's what you probably want to spend your focus on securing in that sense.
The next question, directed to Don, which I think is something that many anxious junior associates in Big Law can relate to. What about the fear of missing a crucial case by running a natural language rather than Boolean search? I think people are having nightmares about being berated by some partner because they missed a very important authority.
That's a terrific question, and I think it's a well-founded fear, but I would allay that, and one of the things I wanted to point out. If you take the old-fashioned Boolean searching, that's relying on running and coming up with good search terms that are run against a specified database. If you make a boo-boo in that syntax, that can really skew your results, and a researcher is just as prone to missing an important case using Boolean search than if they were using natural language processing. The natural language processing tends to be more inclusive. It tends to be more reliable. The Westlaw has sensibly reviews a lot of the results with their Westlaw attorneys to make sure that we don't overlook things. In my demonstration earlier, I tried to show that in essence by looking for what's the standard for who is a public official under libel law. And my initial Boolean search, which was fairly comprehensive in the standard search, missed some of the major cases on point. So there is always that danger of a researcher missing things or having to go through multiple searches or not understanding how to construct a query effectively. Natural language process takes some of the danger of a misconstructed query out of the equation. And I think you're actually, as a junior associate, on firmer ground by relying on the algorithm itself to create a better set of results, which you can then review in greater detail. And I think the recommendations go a long way to helping you not overlook anything that is of significance that might be really kind of landmark law in a way that doesn't exist with Boolean searching.
Here's a follow-up question to that, Don. In what situations would you still recommend to one of the lawyers you're advising to run a Boolean search? Like, it seems like natural language is good when you're at the start of something, you're trying to find out, get the sense of the lay of the land. When do you drill down with an old school Boolean?
I think there are certain cases where when you are very sure of what it is you're looking for, you have defined your legal issue very precisely, or you know exactly what you're looking for. For example, you can run a Boolean search if I need to know what Judge Smith has said about what a public official is for the terms of libel law. I can do a Boolean search, restrict my search to a specific judge or jurisdiction. I can put the results or ask the head notes to provide some more refined or more precise results. I think it really goes to something you just said, which is Boolean works if you have a very precise target or a very precise query. You just need to find something and your terms are defined. Natural language processing, though, really kind of helps the junior associate who might be in a situation of not having a full grasp of the case law on a particular issue, or might not be able to define the language or some of the terms of art if you're doing commercial research. And their natural language processing can be a godsend because it will pick up terms that you as the researcher may have missed. So Boolean, I think, for when you know what you're after, natural language if you are a little vaguer, which I think is probably the starting point for many, many researchers.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. Here's a question back to David. Do machine learning algorithms make decisions in real time?
Yes, I think for many applications, yes. I mean, they're sitting on top of a set of data which may be very dynamic and changing all the time. So certainly with most applications, take the legal research applications Don's talking about here, you're sitting on top of whatever's in Westlaw at the moment, but that's always going to be changing. There's going to be new cases added, new dockets added, new this or that, and so those changes will filter through in more or less real time. Think also of the business side. Data on pricing or matters and those kinds of data sets, they can be very dynamic. So yes, certainly I think there is a lot of real time. It's technology that is sort of designed to work with the data it has, and most of it's not long processes, but just applications that are running on top of data that are constantly updating themselves in most applications, I would think.
Here's a question that relates to your presentation, David, concerning different uses of AI. I know that the focus of today has been legal research, but do you have any overall thoughts on the state of AI as it is used in contract analysis? Any particular thoughts on how well it's doing, or future directions or exciting developments, whether with respect to Thomson Reuters or any other players in the space? So basically the person is curious about AI and contract analysis.
Yeah. Oh, that's a great question, because I really do think that that's one of the most dynamic parts of this space in legal tech generally is the application of technology, including AI technologies, to the contract life cycle management. AI is particularly useful when it comes to document review, contract review, in terms of large review exercises in a M&A due diligence situation, for example. And there are a lot of companies working on this stuff. We partner with some of them. We have our own Contract Express solution that is a contract solution that works on the document automation side of things. And I would say longer term, I think what's really interesting about this is that AI is kind of exposing some of the inconsistencies that are in contracting practices, and it may drive the industry to more standardized automated contracting practices, including the use of blockchain, which is a whole other topic that we could spend a whole seminar on as well. But I think that's a future direction. So I do think contracts is definitely, even today, a very active part of this AI in legal space.
No, absolutely, and I think we will actually have a future webinar or webcast on blockchain, which is a very hot topic that we've been writing about a lot in our pages. Our time is running short, so this is going to be the second to last question. Then I think I have the last question already queued up as well. This one is for you, David, and then I think I have one question for Don. So this question is from a reader or listener. How are AI features affecting the cost of legal research? Is there an effect?
As of now, the stuff that Don is showing you is integrated into Westlaw as it is today. As far as future enhancements go, I can't tell you what that might look like. I think across the board, there are a lot of the applications for AI are in fields where there already are some sort of technology solution. I talked about e-discovery. I talked about contract management. We talked about research. There's a lot of different areas where there is already solutions in place, and many times technology vendors are just adding AI features into those as enhancements. So I don't think there's necessarily a direct cost attachment, and I also think that you sort of have to think of the total cost of using these things as well, in terms of some of the things that Don has been talking about in terms of time savings, et cetera. So I don't know, it's kind of an all over the place answer, but I think their AI features are being added to existing products quite regularly, and it's not necessarily making those things more expensive.
Go ahead. Sorry, Don.
Hi, David. Yeah, just regarding the cost of AI, I mean, there's kind of two parts to that question. In the first instance, we'll talk about due diligence in an M&A context. A lot of that document review is fairly routine, and AI tools are ideally suited for routine, repetitive tasks. So that, in a way, I think clients are asking some of their larger outside counsel to be more efficient. So rather than throwing an army of first-year associates at a stack of documents, if you can have the software do that as effectively as the junior associates can, that will be a cost savings to the client, or if you are a solo practitioner, to yourself. The flip side of that is that the software itself is not some magical out-of-the-box solution. We stick with the due diligence example. The machinery, the software does need to be taught the right, as it were, answer to be effective. So you do need to have the insight of a senior attorney to review the results that are initially generated as a way to teach the software what's right. So there's a cost there. So before we start seeing cost savings, there is an upfront cost in time and effort and training the software to be useful. But I think AI in the long term results in cost savings, as we've seen from Westlaw. Anything that saves a lawyer time is a value right there on the face of it. And the ability not only to save time, but to also get better answers, so you can get things in 2 searches instead of 20, I think are really important. AI can do that well.
No, that's absolutely true. I'm old enough to have learned legal research on books, and if you think about the cost in lawyer hours of scouring through books rather than just clicking through on Westlaw, you can see the cost savings. So here's the final question. It's directed to Don, and the person is curious. Are there any concerns with respect to relying on AI about lawyers becoming too dependent on it and perhaps letting their legal research skills get rusty or dormant?
I don't think so, because the latter part of the question, letting your legal research skills run dormant, remember these tools just produce results for your review. They're not giving you an answer. They're not answering the client's question. They're producing materials that a lawyer can apply their judgment against. In the same way, when Westlaw first hit the scene in the 1980s, I still remember a lot of older lawyers going, there's no way in heck that legal materials can live on a computer. Well, we accept that as a fact. AI is not a magic 8-ball where it's giving an answer just by simply typing in a few searches. It is a force multiplier. It saves you the effort of finding things that you will in turn then, as an advisor, use to make decisions or to advise the client. So it's not the answer. The lawyer is still the answer person. This is just a tool to help you get to the answer quicker, better, faster.
Great. Well, I think that you have definitely shared, both you and David, insights with our readers about how to conduct legal research faster, better, and more efficiently. We thank you for your advice and high-level insights. We thank our audience for tuning in, and we thank Thomson Reuters for sponsoring. The webcast, as I mentioned in the Q&A box, will be recorded and should be available for download for reviewing after 24 hours. You should be receiving an email about that. We have your emails thanks to your registration. So again, thanks to our panelists, thanks to Thomson Reuters, thanks to our audience, and I wish you all a great afternoon. Thank you.